So my third question to this group is, what further efforts of decolonization has your organization considered or taken steps to move beyond just the beyond land acknowledgement?
I'll jump in since I was just talking and I was on a roll here. For us, some of the things that we did in the process of thinking about the land acknowledgement, I talked about wanting to educate ourselves. So we invested in probably 70 to 100, 120 some books on social justice, racial equity, history of this place that we live in. And not only for our own staff to have access to that, to educate themselves, but also for the community. Because we were hearing a lot of discussion about land acknowledgements. And so we wanted to help provide resources where people could go. So that was one step. For me and for some other people that are on this call right now, we've engaged in different social justice activities within the community, looking at the removal of the Braveheart statue and trying to be part of that process. The decolonization group that exists. All those are things that I think that we need to do to move that process forward. It's continuing to educate ourselves about the bigger issues, looking at microaggressions within the community. A simple thing as the name change of a school, supporting the culture and the language of the Tlingit people. Those are things that I think are our responsibilities. If we do the land acknowledgement, that means we have a commitment to move beyond that and to engage in more things that for social justice and the welcoming of all people into that process. That we're in this together, and we need to honor each other, and especially those people that have come before us, and honor, I think, the resiliency. I think that's part of the land acknowledgement is the understanding of the resiliency of the people that have faced a lot of hardships throughout the 10,000 years that they've been here. And so I guess just probably the underlying thing for me is that educating ourselves more and being active to move the process forward so that we are truly honoring the diversity that we have in Sitka. Probably have more to say, but I'll end there.
Very good. Thanks, Loyd.
I'll follow on Loyd, and I'll say that I don't have a ton more to add because I think it's spot on. It's a continuing education process. For myself, being a part of the assembly and being, I guess, in essence, sometimes a conduit for ideas, brought forward into the public dialogue, and then also the possibility of adoption or the work towards change has been something that I've taken on in that service to the community. I was a part of bringing forward the resolution that removed the Braveheart statue. I was a part of being taking on the adoption of, or I guess the task of redeveloping our city seal, and just moving different items forward, and whether they're addressing some of the small, what might be seen as microaggressions, like Loyd pointed out, to larger, fairly very symbolic issues like the relocation of the Braveheart statue. I think that continued education, that continued work towards progress and change is, you know, it's something that we're going to have to work on in this community for quite some time. The healing doesn't happen overnight, obviously. The challenge for some, and you know, going back and looking at how the discussions sometimes fare in the public sphere with making changes, whether they're big or small. It's clear that this is it's a hard thing for people to grapple with sometimes, but having the discussions and I guess coming to light the various different opinions and need for education, just, you know, it brings our community forward, and I've very much valued being a part of it, and seeing our community is willing to work towards some of these things, and you know, I hope to continue to be a part of it in one shape or form or another, you know, as we continue to go. It's been challenging for, you know, everybody, I think, but also very rewarding and healing.
Thanks, Kevin.
I'm going to start out with saying change is really hard for some people, especially in a very small town. And when it comes to something like a land acknowledgement going through and being passed and then being implemented, again, like I stated before, it's like picking that one hay out of the haystack and having the whole pile fall. It can be uncomfortable because it's a first step towards acknowledging the actual history of the first indigenous people who have called America home. And so I think when it comes to a land acknowledgement and progression, you know, for the Sitka School Board, at least as being a part of that body, you know, we have adopted a land acknowledgement. We are working towards renaming our elementary school. We have put into policy a regalia policy. As before, we stated, well, we've never been against Indigenous or people who are of different cultures. We've never been against having our students wear cultural regalia at any event, you know, predominantly at graduation. But we never had a policy that, you know, said in black and white in writing that we support this and we want our students to feel comfortable and we want our students to feel welcome to wear their traditional regalia at such a celebration as graduation. It also, you know, helped write in, you know, the language that protects our graduation from any harmful type of, you know, form of any type of racial symbolism or language that may, you know, try to hurt people. So it was really important. It's, you know, again, once you start something, it leads to the next step and it leads to another step. So when it comes to adopting a land acknowledgement, it also, it's like taking the first bite of the forbidden fruit. You know knowledge now, and now you need to learn more. And in doing that, you know, again, I call it a grassroots effort in a nation that doesn't quite want to see the truth of the history that it has. And so again, we live in a state that doesn't recognize tribes, and we live in a nation that hid an apology within a defense bill on page 45 in 2010, a very small paragraph of an apology to the indigenous people. So when you look at the histories of the indigenous people, when it comes to our land, when it comes to our water, when it comes to our education, we have many different fronts that we have been working towards change. And so a land acknowledgement supports change. And so with that, policy gets changed. With that, a school gets renamed. But, the discussion is going to be interesting and needed. It may not always be favorable. It may be, I will most assuredly say that it will most likely be uncomfortable, because it's an uncomfortable subject. Because nobody wants to see anything that is ugly, and I think Americans' history is full of ugly things, and it's hard to see that truth. So the discussions that may follow, everyone may not be in favor. There will be discussions, there will be feelings. It's a high feeling, emotional topic, because there is a history there. People are healing. When it comes to indigenous people, not everything is kumbaya, where a lot of times, stereotypical as indigenous people, we are spiritual, and we are connected to the land. To some extent, that is so true, but from the American sense, who likes, from the American eye, that likes to fantasize about, how we look at different things, and now we're mystical. We're not that fairy tale person. We're actual real people. We're not in museums. We're here. And so, with that comes real feelings. And so, I really commend any organization that takes on any type of policy or change that works towards the actual realization that people were here before Columbus. People were here before America. We had complex societies and laws, and we had developed religions, and we had our own writing and stories before anyone was here. And so I really commend any organization that takes this on. It's going to be uncomfortable at times. It will be controversial, but as a person who is part of a body as a whole, I remind myself, I don't do anything alone. I do it with the people that were elected with me, and we go together, and we make our decisions together. It may take some time. Again, like Mount Denali. It took over 40 years for the Geographical Society to even rename the mountain Denali back to its original name. So it may take time. It may take a lot of discussion. People may not agree with you. Indigenous people may not agree with you, and that's completely fine. That doesn't make it wrong. So I really commend anyone who takes this on. And I say, don't let that hinder you. Don't let that hinder your progress, because anything that sheds light on the history as a whole is meaningful. Because again, we need this to happen on so many different levels, on so many different reasons why, because our fish, our land, the land that we call home, you know, our families, our children, you know, they all depend on that. So thank you.
Blossom.
In terms of next steps, my thoughts are influenced a lot by Dr. Annalee Singh, who did a book study here. Her book was called The Racial Healing Handbook. She's a professor in Tulane, and she actually zoomed in with us and had a big impact on Sitka. I think the first step, if you're in an organization, you're a person in an organization, and the first step is listen, learn, and think. So listen, learn, and think. Listen to other people and listen to your heart and think about the topic. And so learning and that self-education is the first step, I think. And then activities, the next step. And one of the first activities that she really recommended, she was an advocate of call in, not call out. Call in, not call out. And if we're all born into this racial caste system and we're young, impressionable people and we grow up in this, we shouldn't be shocked and surprised when people do things that are perpetuating this system, which is hundreds of years old, and it's not going to be dismantled easily. It's not going to be dismantled overnight. But as she said, white and light-skinned people, we have work to do. If you're a person of color and you're a target and you've had the most harm and hurt and trauma because of this, there's times that the most revolutionary thing you could do is take a break and rest and just survive. But her counsel to us, and she's biracial, light skin though, and she said, light skinned people and white people, we have work to do. Indigenous people didn't create this system. They didn't create boarding schools. Indigenous people didn't create a system where, you know, A and B started in 1912 because there wasn't any rights for Native people. So this system was created from Russians and then colonial Americans by and for primarily straight, white, middle-aged men, my group's who made this. We made this to benefit us, consciously, subconsciously. This was not a big collaborative effort. This wasn't, let's bring everybody in and let's find something that'll be a win-win for all. Are you kidding me? So that's part of that learning thing, is learning Alaska's history and learning that. So we're in these systems and we're all arriving it innocently. And so call in, not call out. And then for activity, one of the really prouder moments I've had of our little town here, there was a group that's still going. They meet every other Tuesday, the decolonization discussion group. But going into 2020, they had this Project 108, and it was to try to inspire and document and collect 108 inspired local actions towards racial equity and healing and dismantling this caste system. And what's really neat is that it started in 2020, and then after George Floyd, there was a spark lit, I think, everywhere, which was in May, June 2020. And you can go onto the website and you can see in its action, is people taking creative action. It's the artist, it's the teacher, it's the Sitka Women's Club doing the book study on caste, one of the best books you can read on this. It was people doing things in schools with land acknowledgements. It was taking a statue down that glorified somebody who the Khunget called Lushtik, which means no heart. We glorified, out of all the white people who came, one gave the order to fire cannons, and we decided to give this glorified image in the public square of him. And so that was an action to take that down. But if you want to see a list of actions, go to that site, just put in your search engine, Sitka Decolonization Discussion Group, and it's Project 108. And you'll see all these actions and pictures and ideas. And I think that that's the step. So learn about it, and then call in, not call out, and then take activity. And then my two book recommendations, the best one I've ever read on this is Caste. It's a caste system that we find ourselves in. Caste is the best one. And then the Racial Healing Handbook by Dr. Annalee Singh. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug.
I guess I have the last little say on this little part of it. as Braveheart goes, you know, I don't have any, I think all of us at our last meeting acknowledged that how small of a step this is to do with this land acknowledgement. It's such a small step. It's such a small gesture, but it's a very important one. And it's an important place for us to start as an organization and to start our meetings that way. You know, it's also very easy to put it on our website or, you know, something like that. So I think those little steps are very, they're important, but they're very easy. And I do feel like, you know, there's, as an organization, Braveheart is serving the community. We're working with volunteers from the community and serving the people in the community that need some extra support in whatever way that we can. And I think all of us need to have some growth and grow that way. But it'll be interesting to see how we can kind of incorporate maybe some more of those books that Doug's mentioning, or but just, you know, just having that be an education to kind of moving us forward personally. And as our volunteers, we really do feel like all parts of the community are important. All members of the community are important, and grief and suffering from isolation and loneliness and grief, it has no borders. It has no, it doesn't hit just one group of people. It hits us all. So as an organization, it's important for us to be there for people that, and for ourselves, you know, to grow and learn to be there for all community members. So as a little organization, I can't say that we're doing a whole lot more, but I think that it's opened up a door to some more discussion as a board, and keeping our diversity on our board and in our service that we do in the community.
I had one more thing to say, if I could. I think as we move beyond land acknowledgements, I think those organizations that have chosen to do a land acknowledgement, I would invite them to begin to look at their organizational structure, their policies, their procedures, that when we start talking about diversity and honoring all people, I think it's important that, you know, to realize that our organizations were probably structured by the dominant society or the dominant culture, and that maybe some of the policies, procedures, the way of being, the way of inviting people in, the way of responding to people may not meet what's best for that particular person. So really, if you believe in land acknowledgements, then we need to do a self-assessment, I think, of our organizational structure, our policies, our procedures, how we respond to people. Are they culturally open? Do they invite different ways of different cultures to engage easily with us? So for me, if you're doing a land acknowledgement, the challenge is to really look at how is our organization doing that builds an open door for all the diversity that we have in our community. Because I think, you know, when you start looking at health disparities, that's part of that health disparity is the way that we approach each other to provide our goods and services. And so for me, it's beyond just a recognition of the land that we're on, but how do we open ourselves up, our organizations up, to be inviting of the diversity that we have? That's, for me, is a challenge, and that's a next step, I think, or one of the next steps. And I like what Michele said in terms of it's a small step, but the land acknowledgement's a small step, but it's an important step. It gets the process going. And we need to be creative on how we move it forward in all different ways so that all the diversity of our community is welcome.
Yeah, appreciate that, Lloyd. That's certainly something for me as a campus director that I wrestle with is, how do we make this a more welcoming environment and climate and more welcoming organization for everybody? Because universities are especially are guilty of, or they're rooted in Western culture. I mean, you trace back the history of the university, and it's absolutely steeped in Western culture. Thank you for all of those insights.